The Helldivers debate as old as time has once again hit the headlines, but this time with an added element and concerns from parts of the player base. Thrown into the mix is Arrowhead's answer of selling the solution while largely ignoring the past, and it makes for an interesting discussion. In case you haven't done so already, please consider hitting subscribe. If you're on mobile, please take a moment to hype the video, and now, let's dive into the latest from our favorite democracy-spreading shooter, Helldivers. As the Entrenched Division Warbond went live on March 17th, it surprised more than a few with its weaponry and just how effective they actually were. After seeing the initial Warbond reveal trailer, the community was firmly planted in the mixed feelings category, especially over how ineffective the weapons looked versus the enemies in that trailer. But when we got them, both the Flam Stoker and Cremator, when coupled with the changes to fire, were impressive. And I said as much in this video where I broke down each piece in that Warbond. However, one additional weapon was tied to Entrenched Division, but was not technically a part of the Warbond: the Sweeper. And this slam-fire medium armor pen shotgun has sparked off the LAP versus map discussions once again, but now with an added element to this topic. Helldiver 2's power creep problem explained: is fan pressure ruining Arrowhead's balancing decisions? Coming to us from a recent FandomWire article, they go on to say, power creep in Helldivers 2 has always been a slow burn rather than a sudden explosion, but the arrival of the SG-97 Sweeper alongside the Entrenched Division Warbond seemed to have turned that slow burn into something the community cannot keep quietly complaining about on Reddit alone. The argument is straightforward. Instead of revisiting underperforming weapons and bringing them up to speed, it increasingly looks like Arrowhead just releases a better one. And given how vocal this community has historically been about every balanced decision, it was only a matter of time before someone put a name to it. Okay, this is me interjecting into this article right now, and we've seen this argument be made and pick up traction within the Helldivers community that Arrowhead sells the solution instead of fixing the problem. FandomWire ran with this headline back in February stating Arrowhead might never fix Helldiver 2's issues because its sell a solution strategy is more profitable. And I will say that the gist of this article is more about selling solutions through Warbonds instead of fixing core in-game issues, but the concept of selling something new versus going in and adjusting the old is what applies to today's power creep discussion. I know because I've read plenty of your comments about how you'd like this weapon or that weapon to receive some love. Comments like, man, I used to rock this weapon way back in the day, but now it's so overclassed. You know, I loved it, but I had to switch over to something else, are really pretty common within the Helldivers forums. Now, part of this is Arrowhead, who have shown they are ready and willing to tinker with in-game balance and hidden mechanics like what was done to fire status effects in the Coyote, but there's also a consistent pattern where instead of going back in and bringing up the underperforming and older weapons, the player base is instead offered up a new and shiny alternative that will, of course, set them back super credits, instantly eclipsing the old weapons that we already owned. Of course, players can farm for those super credits while planetside, and many of you have said as much in my comment section, but you've seen me show and talk about how Helldivers rockets up the Steam top sellers charts every single time they release a new Warbond, which is based on dollars generated, and you're not going to hit number 3 on this chart when players are using farmed super credits to purchase the Entrenched Division Warbond. Know what I'm saying? Also, and this is just coming off the top of my head here, if you want to dive even further down this rabbit hole of monetization, you could add in full player-controlled weapon customization. Why would Arrowhead give players the ability to add underbarrel attachments to pretty much all their primary weapons, which would in theory be a free upgrade to the game, when you can instead sell them the 1-2 or the Flam Stoker? Why tweak the Halo M90A shotty you've already sold to players as part of the ODST Warbond when you can instead, for 400 super credits a pop, sell them the Double Freedom or the Sweeper? Which is the perfect segue to pick up again with the FandomWire article as they ask the all-important question, are new weapons making older ones obsolete? They go on to say the sweeper shotgun is, to put it bluntly, very good. A rapid-firing, medium armor penetrating shotgun with a generous ammo reserve, round-by-round reload, and slam-fire capability. For a Superstore exclusive, it arrived carrying a lot of weight. The problem is what it made look outdated overnight. The M90A shotgun, which came bundled with the much-hyped Halo ODST Warbond, launched as a light armor-penetrating weapon, something that already left a portion of the Halo fans feeling shortchanged at the time. Now, compared to the sweeper, it barely has a leg to stand on. And here's where FandomWire has gone in and cited this Reddit post highlighting the sweeper versus the M90A shotgun, where the post says, "This is what I call a power creep, ladies and gentlemen." And this Reddit post has highlighted the superior armor pen, recoil fire rate, DPS, spare shells, and how much ammo you get back from an ammo box the sweeper has statistically over the M90A, while the ballistic damage is technically 100 higher for the ODST shotgun. I will also mention that the M90A has a superior stagger force value over the sweeper, but again, as so many players have already commented, the best form of stagger is when you blow an enemy's head clean off. Why stop a charging target when you can liquefy them? And trust me, I get that side of the argument. Now, I know there's some pretty firm ideas entrenched around in the Helldivers community over the M90A. One side being that it should stay always as a light pen weapon because it has that stagger force and high ballistic damage, while another side wholeheartedly thinks it should have been moved over to medium armor pen the very moment the double freedom dropped into the game. And of course now, we've got the sweeper thrown into the mix. Just to remind you, the M90A was part of the legendary ODST Warbonds, so that $15 worth of super credits, whether farmed or paid for on a credit card, has already been collected. And at $4 a pop, you can pick up a statistically better version of the M90A, now in the sweeper. Personally, and you've heard me say this time and time again in my uploads, I would love for Arrowhead to go back in and do a comprehensive balance pass to get those underperforming weapons we already own kind of up to snuff. Licensing agreements aside, why can't the Killzone weapons receive weapon customization? Why doesn't the studio want to touch the ODST weapons? Hell, why is the AR-59 the only way to get a suppressor on an assault rifle? Many would argue because it allows the studio to control the flow of content, and as the earlier article pointed out, it gives them the ability to sell us back the solution, or in this case, instead of bringing up the older, lesser performing weapons, we are offered better options to purchase. Let's finish up this last bit from FandomWire before moving on. They go on to say, that's the crux of it, really. The unwritten rule has always been that light pen weapons compensate with better handling, faster TTK on soft targets, and more generous ammo. And by the way, TTK is time to kill. The sweeper doesn't particularly care for that rule. It just does more in more situations against more things. The fix the community keeps bringing up is simple enough. Give the M90A medium penetration, nudge its damage slightly, and you have two legitimate options with different strengths. A proper side grade, they call it. Right now, though, one is a loadout staple, and the other is a nostalgia pick for Helldivers who really, really love Halo. Here's where things do get a little uncomfortable, though. Not every weapon in this debate is actually bad, and not every buff demand is actually earned. We have all met that Helldiver, the one who has never touched a light pen weapon since early 2024 because a tier list told them not to. The R72 Sensor and the last 13 Trident are both light pen weapons that have been quietly excellent, tearing through democracy's enemies in a way a spreadsheet would never suggest. Yet the light pen is worthless narrative persists with stubborn dedication. There is a real argument that Arrowhead has been getting backed into a corner. Each time the community hammers a weapon as underpowered, the easiest resolution is releasing something shinier rather than re-examining the original. Over time, that does push the baseline upward. But to their credit, the studio has also shown that they can and will walk things back when it genuinely matters. For instance, the grenade launcher is back to medium pen, and the one true flag now draws enemy aggro after enough people made a sensible case for it. These are not the decisions of a studio that stopped listening, just one that is sometimes choosing the quicker path under constant pressure from what might be the most opinionated player base in live service gaming. Alright, as always, links to today's sources will be found in the video description and pinned comment, and I highly encourage you to go check this out on your own time. But before I turn to you, my viewers, for your feedback on this topic, I did want to push back on several things the FandomWire article mentions here towards the end. With the first being, they said that instead of re-examining the original items, Arrowhead releases a new weapon, and then they go on to say that does push the baseline upwards. And at least to me, it's not the baseline that is pushed upwards, because if it were, then these older OG weapons would move up with that minimum standard. No, at least from what I've seen in my 1,000+ hours playing HD2, is that when they release these new weapons, it creates outliers that spike up and excel for a short time, and then a balance pass or two later are brought back down to normalcy. Also, and I'm asking this because I don't work in game development, is it easier to design and program a new weapon than to, say, go into the coding and change a few things with an existing one? I mean, in this case, would it take more time, more manpower, and resources to design the sweeper and drop it into the game versus going in and changing up the M90A to make it more competitive? I will also say that the LAP versus map debate has been raging since the dawn of time inside HD2, and there are some very good LAP options inside the game. FandomWire mentions the Sensor and the Trident, but you know, I've had fun and success with things like the Diligence, the Knight SMG, the Cookout, the Scythe, and the Sickle, just to name a few. However, one facet the article misses out on beyond the LAP map debate is explosive weapons, and how clearly this game is custom tailored to create a chasm between the high and mighty explosive damage and pretty much everything else. I mean, I would much rather bring a Punisher Plasma over a Tendi on bot missions every day of the week, but again, there is clearly something here that Arrowhead needs to address. But yeah, here's where I now turn to you for that valuable feedback. The question is, will the studio take the time to go in and bring those forgotten and overshadowed weapons up to par with some of the newer and stronger options? Also, does there need to be a more distinct difference between LAP and map weapons? And also, and finally, on a more general topic, what would be your master plan to overhaul LAP, map, explosive damage, and the rest of it? Drop a comment and let's see where the community lands on this one, and all I ask is that you keep it civil. And I think you know what I'm saying there. I honestly don't know if there will ever be a studio-wide spring cleaning of sorts where they go back in and bring the older gear up to some present levels of performance, or if they're going to continue to be on this pattern of sell the new stuff to cover for the older deficiencies. Remember to hit subscribe and ring the notifications bell to receive my future upload alerts. If you're on mobile, please hype the video. And before I go, a heartfelt thanks goes out to all of my hardcore channel members. Until the next one, this is LtBuzzLitebeer signing off.